Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is a rock star, Cameron Atlas. Cameron is an emotional intelligence speaker and high-performance expert. He speaks to audiences around the world on how to thrive in an ever-changing world. In his talks, he delivers multi-sensory experiences on stage, blending education with storytelling videos and live music on a grand piano and a guitar. Did a TEDx event in Italy recently. What future are we creating? The largest TEDx event in Italy. Man, just your resume goes on and on, but I just want to say, welcome, Cameron.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
And I wish we could give you a round of applause, dude.
I appreciate it, Deke. It's great to be here.
Well, man, when first we met, I said that, so our good mutual friend, Dov Barron, introduced us. And I said, I always term Dov as the world's most interesting man, but I think you're giving him a run for his money. I've not told him that, talking to him on Friday, but you've just lived this amazing life shaped by all these amazing experiences. So I believe you're in Austin, Texas right now, but give people a little bit of your backstory because it's just incredible and inspirational.
Oh, I appreciate it. And yeah, Dov's a great man. It's always great catching up with him. We usually catch up when up there in Vancouver. So last thing we did, we went axe throwing together and went with a group of us. I got a group together up in Vancouver, my network there. So that was really fun.
There was no beer drinking going along with that, was there?
I personally don't drink, but the others had others. And actually, it wasn't until afterwards because you weren't allowed to have drinks in there.
I was going to say, that probably doesn't
protocol. It's a fair protocol, I guess. It has been a wild ride. I grew up in outback Australia. Dad, a farmer, mum, a teacher, and still have the farm over there. My brother's taken that over. I've got young nieces and nephews back there and love getting back there. I spent all of my schooling back there. It was like 9 hours, about a 9-hour drive to the biggest, closest big city. Yeah. And so long way from anywhere. My singing lessons during grade 12 in school, year 12 in school, were over the phone because there wasn't a singing teacher anywhere in town or anywhere nearby. And so the technology wasn't anywhere near, obviously, what we've got today, where, it was just it was called open access, which was just basically a landline, and you just put it on speakerphone, and that was the music lesson. That was the singing lesson. So, I think I learned at a very early age the value of technology and the ability to be able to connect people that might not have otherwise had the opportunity to connect and be able to be provided with certain experiences. And then there was this moment, I only reflected on this a little while ago. I think I was in year 11 at school, and the end of year presentation night that we had for the school, they had a guest speaker there. And I remember being really inspired by this person and feeling that, if I put in the work, that anything was possible. And secretly just there, I never told anybody then. I want to be on stage at some stage and delivering that talk. And I had no idea that there was anything like a career or anything like that, any way of doing that. It was more just being able to have achieved something that somebody else would want to listen and somebody else could get a lesson from or an insight from. Like I could share my story and it would inspire others to be able to get out there and achieve their own dreams. And so fast forward to 2017, after selling everything that I owned, I went on this big project around the world, filming and capturing the sights and the sounds of different places. And I just finished up filming in Colombia for 3 months there. Rainforest, waterfalls, beaches, all these like stunningly beautiful locations. I was out in the thick of it. And I flew to Argentina because I stumbled across an apartment that had a grand piano in it. And I thought that would be perfect for creating the soundtrack for this short film. And it was a concert grade grand piano in this apartment and big soaring ceilings. I thought, perfect. So I fly down there, and within the first week, I wrote the song for the soundtrack for the short film. Wrote the song that actually I ended up utilizing in the TEDx talk that you mentioned about, which is crazy to think about as well. Had no idea at the time that I'd be writing something that would then be performed live on stage in front of all these people, and bringing people from more than 40 countries around the world into the music video that was involved in that talk, which is pretty crazy. The craziest thing that happened to me there, though, had nothing to do with the music specifically in that moment. It was, I was lying on the bed one day, and just this thought, this question, this reflection popped into my head of, if my life ended today, what haven't I done that I wish I had? And it was this, it hit me big time because I had an answer straight away.
Yeah.
And, when I've shared it with other people, like sometimes, somebody will have an answer straight away. If, those of you tuning in, if you have an answer straight away, write that down.
Yep.
Like not but it's not possible. Oh, but I can't do it. Whatever that little instinct that happened, which exactly what happened to me that day, I was quiet enough to listen. That question, I'd had this, after coaching for many years, I'd gone through exercise and taken clients through exercises of, imagine yourself on a rocking chair, you're 80 years of age or 90 years of age, and what you're looking back over your life, what's your life been about to be really, really great, really worthwhile. And it's a great exercise to go through. But if you've still got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of that left, it can lead to a bit of complacency because I got plenty of time to make that happen.
Yeah.
But if you're dead today, if you're gone, if there's no more life to live, what haven't you done that you wish you had? And for me that day, straight away, it was delivering a talk with a grand piano on stage. I had this dream of mine for so many years. I had been coaching, speaking for about 7 years by then, 6, 7 years by then, professionally. And I'd been writing music, but for probably 20 years by then, a bit over 20 years, written hundreds of songs, but I hadn't found a way of blending the two together in a way that created this unified experience that was both unique and valuable. Because anyone can create a unique experience, but a unique and valuable experience, that's where the real magic lies, I see. And add to that a level of classiness to it. They were the key parts. And so I had this moment back in 2015 where I got booked in Australia. I got booked for a talk, and I was so excited to have a grand piano on stage, and it was going to be amazing. And then 2 days before, Deke, got cancelled. The event got cancelled. And I was crushed, man. It was this elusive dream that was finally about to come true. And then it just felt like it was ripped away from me again. And so the belief that I had in myself to make it happen diminished, like big time. So I kind of went away from it for a period of time, just kept the two separate, continued to keep the two separate while I continued writing and creating. But that day when it was, okay, if that's your answer to that question, go and make it happen. Go and make it happen. And I went and just reached out to anybody in my network that would listen. Said, this is what I want to do. I want to have a grand piano on stage while delivering a talk, over and over and over and over again. I was still in Argentina at the time, just having calls in the apartment there. And then eventually I came across somebody who said, hey, we've got an event coming up. We've got a couple of events on the same day. There's 700 people at each of those events at a performing arts center. I think this would be perfect for you to open up one of these conferences and then close out the second. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the day that I was on stage. They utilized in the talk, utilized the drone footage, the nature footage of mine from Colombia, the opening part of the talk, I played the soundtrack that I created in the apartment that day while the footage was on this massive screen behind me. It's, it's a performing arts center. So like the screen is huge. It's not one of those, pop-up ones. It's like epic proportions, right? And so did that. And yeah, it was just this, an experience of, okay, if that's possible, I wonder what else is.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy about that? I had this realization back when I was, I think it was maybe year 4 or 5. I'd been maybe playing piano for a couple of years. Maybe it was year 6, somewhere around that age. And I played piano for about 5 years in that first round. And we had this talent show in town. Town's only 2,500 people, some surrounding farms and that kind of stuff brings it up to about 3,500. That's it. And we had this talent show in town at the local hall down the main street. And we went and picked up my grandpa from town, from his house, drove down to the main street, parked across the other side of this street, this diagonal park. And because I remember it so clearly. And I got out, I was in the back passenger seat behind the driver's seat of Dad's. And got out and I had my sheet music in my hand. And then I thought to myself, I got this. And I went and put the sheet music back in the car and I'm good. I'm ready. And went across, and when it was my turn, others had performed, and when it was my turn, I went up to this upright piano and started off beautifully, flawlessly. And then I lost my place. And I completely screwed it up. Royal bomb, right? And the only person that, the way that they voted was people put money in because it was a fundraiser. My grandpa was the only one that I think probably put money in. I got back to my seat, he said, I put all my money in for you. I said, you're probably the only one. Grandpa, because he was on the farm for so many years, by then he was extremely hard of hearing, so he wouldn't have even heard that I screwed up, right? And so I went back and it did impact me. It impacted me for many years, and it actually impacted me for many years right up until that 2017 engagement. Yeah. And because I realized that the question that I was asking myself is, what if I screw this up?
Yep.
What if I screw this up again? And I realized that was going on unconsciously over and over and over and over again. And when I realized that, I then took a good hard look at myself and then was able to reposition and reframe that to, especially with the level of training that I do now. You are not that person. You are not even close to that person.
Yep.
That person, that kid thought he was ready. He wasn't even close to being prepared. With the amount of practice that it takes to be able to deliver without even having to think about it, to develop a level of mastery or a level of excellence at a stage where you can do it with your eyes closed, that takes discipline. It takes execution. It doesn't just take confidence. It takes skill set. It takes relentless pursuit of something over and over and over again till a point where you are extraordinarily prepared to be able to deliver in any situation. And even if you lose your place, you're able to find your way back in some way, shape or form. And that's been a massive lesson for me to be able to, and when other limits come up, because they'll continue to come up for the rest of my life as they do for everybody. And there's always another level to grow into that if I can see that, I'm not the person that I was yesterday.
Yep.
Right, because I've continued to build the skill sets. I've continued to build these abilities. And whether it's when I'm coaching somebody, speaking, delivering on the music side or anywhere else, in a relationship or being a great friend, anywhere, that I'm a greater version of myself today because of what happened, but also because of who I'm becoming next as well, in who I'm becoming now, who I'm becoming next through the things that I'm executing on. So huge lessons in that. And there's a few stories weaved in there that some of the things that have happened over the last bit of time.
It's funny to me because I think what you're talking about, I believe in personal evolution as individuals. we're always evolving. And, some people say, well, you're changing your mind, you're wishy-washy. I'm like, no, I'm growing as a person. So to change your point of view, I think is a very healthy thing. But it's like you talking about having that experience. So I had a guest on the podcast recently. She's a former producer for MSNBC and a wonderful lady, Ariana Picari. But she said, oh, you're just a natural at this. I'm like, well, I did a year of radio, live radio, 3 hours a day, interviewing people. I'm like, that year prepared me to do this, but doing this for 2+ years, you always get better, but you've got to work on it. And it's people say, well, you're a natural. I'm like, no, it takes a hell of a lot of practice. But, your big dream to do what you did with the grand piano. I attended South by Southwest for the first time this year. And before I knew I had esophageal cancer, but I'm like, I'm going to speak at South by Southwest next year. Now, I don't have that gig booked yet, but it's good to have those goals. And it's funny, you talk about the fear. I think that's what people let fear stop them. I'm like, everybody I know, no matter how successful, has confronted fear in their lives. Great young lady that's a friend of mine. She's a nationally known sportscaster now, grew up here in Augusta. But I had her on my radio show. Her dance troupe, when she was a very little girl, had a gig at Radio City Music Hall. She threw up on the stage at Radio City Music Hall. She was like, the most embarrassing moment of my life. She said, but after that, there was nothing that could be that embarrassing to me. So we build off our failures, I think, much more than we build off our successes.
There is so much to unpack. Like each piece that you've just shared there's such wisdom in there. First up, around the beliefs and changing our mind, there was a song that I wrote a number of years ago, and in part of it goes, take me as I am, see I'm a walking contradiction. What I thought was absolute couldn't be much further from the truth.
Yep.
Right. And so it's true until proven wrong. It's true until proven otherwise. Science is true until proven wrong. There is certain scientific discoveries from many years ago that aren't true anymore. And so if science can be, a change of mind, then, in terms of the things, the beliefs that we have about the world, about ourselves, about each other, can absolutely change. And I believe that, and this is a generalization, but we as a society are becoming too ingrained in what we believe.
I agree.
And as a result, we're not willing and open to hearing and seeing somebody else's point of view. Instead, we cancel people out or say that you're wrong or distance ourselves from them. I encourage those conversations because it's in those conversations it's healthy discussion. It's going into it and having a question of, why is it that you believe that? What is it about that led you there? Was it something that happened as a child or some experience that you had? And you're able to start to understand where that person comes from. You might still not agree with them, but you'll have a better understanding as to where they're coming from. And that, I'm again, it's a very interesting space to be, where if we aren't open to other people's points of view, algorithms from a technology standpoint and in the future AI standpoint are going to reinforce our biases. And that to me is a very dangerous place to be, because if we become even more separated, that's again where we're unable to challenge our thinking, right? Yeah. Let alone seeing whether we're right or wrong, but like challenging our thinking. That's when we challenge ourselves, when we challenge our thinking, that's what results in growth. Because we get to experience a different point of view, and whether that's somebody else's viewpoint or whether it's our own viewpoint, and we're presented with a new piece of information that is, I can do this. I can achieve something better than the life that I currently have. That all of a sudden my empowerment of myself goes up and my ability to be able to execute goes up. So that's one major piece. The second that you mentioned about around failure, one thing that I see about and believe about failure is it's important to ask a question. Is the fear warranted?
Yep.
Because fear is there at the end of the day to keep us safe. It's there to stop us from dying. It's there to allow us to continue surviving, right? Go back to, thousands of years. That's what it was there for. And in today's day and age, there are certain areas that we think are scary, but the fear isn't necessarily warranted.
Yeah.
And so if the fear is warranted, get yourself out of there. Like if you're going down a dark alleyway and there's someone down there, run, like get out of there. But if there is a scenario where it is challenging you to step up to a greater version of yourself, where there's an opportunity for you to grow and evolve, but it is scary because it's unknown, because you don't know if you're capable of it, because you haven't ventured into that realm yet, that's not necessarily warranted. What's warranted is that you need to develop the skill sets that would lead to you not having the fear, or at least having the fear and still executing on that, what needs to be done in that process, right? And so, fear is another big one. There was another one that I was going to mention, but I can't remember what it is right now from some of the things that you mentioned. But there are a couple that I wanted to touch on because, you shared a couple of truth bombs there. That's for sure.
Well, man, I will tell you. So you talk about fear, and I've shared with people in general, my listeners, my viewers. When I was first told that I might have cancer, first thought that goes through your head is, am I going to die? So the days waiting to get my endoscopy to tell me if I did or didn't, that's some challenging times. But then when I first got the prognosis, they're like, you're young, you're healthy, you're probably going to be okay. I'm like, well, what can I do with this? And one of the fears was, I'm like, oh my God, what do I do for a living? I freaking talk. How am I going to do what I do for a living? How am I going to do my podcast? How am I going to be on other people's? How am I going to do keynote addresses? It hasn't slowed me down at all. And once you face the fear, I shared with you before coming on air, I did a series of interviews with Starts With Us, who you're familiar with. So it was an hour long of raw footage, but they're like, are you good doing it with your voice? I'm like, this has not hurt me at all. And I tell people, communication is about connection, not perfection. You're not going to get perfection from my voice, but hopefully we'll get that connection. But they released the first video comparing basically extreme polarization to cancer and how it damages our support systems of family and friends. The first installment was 1 minute and 27 seconds, got over 80,000 views on TikTok in less than a week. And I'm like, I'm not going to let this stop me from doing what I do. And once you push through that fear, it's like, I had other fears in my life, but I'll tell you, confronting potential life and death will make you realize a lot of that crap you were afraid of is not worth being afraid of whatsoever.
Yeah, I remember the piece that you mentioned just before about the woman throwing up and the experience that you've gone through as well. There's an exercise that I take clients through when they're dealt with like a savage blow. Yeah, in whatever area that is, whether it's financial ruin or it's a business challenge or it's a relationship, it could be a divorce or it could be a life and death situation, is ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario here?
Yep.
And can I make peace with that? And if you can make peace with the worst case scenario by reframing it in your mind, by writing it down, what that worst case for that woman, it was, throwing up on stage. Oh, it can't get any worse. That's the worst case scenario then? Rock on. If you've made peace with the worst case scenario, what does fear have over you? Nothing, because you've already made peace with the worst case scenario. So if everything's going to be better from there and you already know that you're going to be okay in the worst case, now the fear is no longer warranted. And so now you've got to step up, right? And so that's a huge component. And then what you were sharing there is your ability to overcome adversity. And the way that I see this, and I've done this within my own self, do this with clients as well, but for me personally, we both speak for a living in different ways, shapes and forms. For me, there's also the music component, both the guitar and the piano, and the songs that I've written. I have gone through scenarios of what if my hands get cut off? Like, what if I'm in an accident and I no longer have a use of my hands? What if I'm in if I'm paralyzed and I'm unable to utilize other parts of my body? And for me, I've gone through those scenarios to understand, okay, if that occurred, there's a couple of things that I've thought about. One is robotics and being able to deliver talks with robotics on stage then. There will be at least the next 5, 10, 15 years, there's going to continue to be innovations. I already want to play with a robot band on stage with a talk. So I think that I'm going to do that anyway, but that would be something to be able to deliver and show how technology and humans together can function in a beautiful way that allows us to enhance our experience of life. I've seen this firsthand with my uncle passed away earlier this year, who's an incredibly important part of my life. And, more than 40 years ago, he had a car accident. And in that car accident, he broke his neck and he was paralyzed from the neck down and has been a quadriplegic for more than 40 years.
Wow.
Technology and medicine allowed him to live an extraordinary life. I say those two things and love, because the relationship that he had with my auntie is something that I absolutely aspire to. They just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary before he passed away. And they had an incredible relationship. I, again, massively aspire to that. And it's something that I'm deeply inspired by. And so those few aspects with that, thinking about different scenarios, the other one would be, there'll be at some stage and again, I'll do this anyway, but if I'm disabled in some way, whether it's my hands getting cut off or not able to do what I do now in the way that I do it, I want to have a brain scanner that as I'm playing the piano, it's lighting up the parts of my brain as I'm creating something new, improvising, and then showcasing the parts of my brain that are lighting up as I'm remembering something. Yeah. And what are the differences in terms of the parts of the brain? So things like that, thinking through of going, and also what am I doing to build skill sets that mean that if I can't talk, can I still deliver something extraordinary? Well, yes, I can play. And if I can't talk or play, can I still create something extraordinary? Yes, I can. I can write music. I can write songs, or I can write from a keynote standpoint and have somebody else speak that it could be through technology again. And so there are many different ways. This is scenario planning that I go through with clients. You are planning out scenarios that could occur. It's not you being a downer about the life, but it is about you determining how will you adapt to situations if they occur, because if they do occur in the future, you are already ready to go. Yeah. You've already gone through the grief. You've already gone through the challenging situation, understanding how you'll process it in your mind. Yes, it'll be challenging in the moment, but it won't be anywhere near as challenging as if you haven't already made peace with that. Because then you're going to have to go through all of that grief, all of that challenge, all at one specific time, and it's going to kick your absolute butt. And you're going to fall back before you're able to, fall forward again and move forward again. I'd rather be able to utilize the challenges. And that's what you've done here, Deke. And I massively admire that about you. You've utilized it. It's because, and if you can see this, it's because of this happening, I am an even more extraordinary human. Yeah. Whereas somebody else could make the excuses because of this occurring, I can't do what I once did before. I had this actually, I just remembered my great aunt. She lived till she was 94, and we went and saw her when she was 92. Right? My aunt, Auntie Nell, and all on my dad's side of the family, they were go-getters, absolute go-getters. My Auntie Nell in particular. We went and drove down from the town that I grew up in, about 3.5 hour drive. And we drove there. And this is the last conversation that I ever had with her. Myself and my sister went in, and my auntie, she was very well known for what's called pasties in Australia. They're like a meat and vegetable filled pastry, right? So well known within the family. Like she made thousands of these, thousands of them.
Making me hungry.
And right, so much so at her funeral, there was, they had a little bookmark with a beautiful photo of her and a little about her on one side, and then you turn it over and the recipe was on the back. That's how much it was a part of her life, right? And so she was 92. We went there and we were having a conversation in the living room. She was seated on one of the single seats, and my sister and I were on the two-seater. And she said how she's not able to make the pasties anymore. She said she's not strong enough to be able to lift the pasties out. Her hands, not able to stand and bring them out. And so her legs don't work as well as they used to. And she said, we're expecting her to be down about it. And she just said, well, my legs don't work, but my hands work just fine.
Yeah.
And so I'm knitting and making these dolls. And she pointed over to a little basket over on the other side. And there were these dolls nearly 8 to 12 inches high, and was making these dolls, knitting these dolls, stuffing them filled. And so how many of those are you making? She said, 2 every 3 days. She was churning them out like a processing line, and she was making them for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, which is an amazing service in Australia that provides, flights for people that need it in regional locations like we were, which has come in super handy for family members of mine, at times of need. So an incredible service. And so here was somebody who had something that was an incredibly important part of her life. And she found something else that kept her mind, body, and spirit active. I'll never forget the last thing that, just before we move on from this story, I still remember it so fondly. The last thing that she said that day before we left, she said, I was woke up at 2 a.m. the other night. I woke up and I was in bed and I was thinking, and well, if you're going to think in here, you might as well think out there. So she got up at 2 a.m., 92 years old, went and sat in the little chair and started knitting away. And I utilize that anytime that I'm awake for a decent amount of time in bed. Yeah. And it's like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I go, well, if you're going to think in here, you might as well think out there. So much so, there was a song that I wrote in Nashville in 2021, it would have been. It was 1:52 a.m. I document like when I start writing the songs. It was 1:52 a.m. And the song starts off, lately I've been waking up somewhere around 2 a.m. There's some thinking that can't seem to wait till the morning light comes in. And it's this song about ideas and where they come from and where that thinking comes from and what allows us to create in this world. And any time that I play that song for somebody now, it's just a moment of remembering her, and it's just this really fond memory of somebody who was so able naturally, she never went through the training that I take clients through and the amount of work and time and effort and money that I put invested in myself, which is totally worth it. But she just had it. Her and her sisters and brothers just seemed to have it. And, the ability to be able to adapt when things go wrong, when things are challenging, the adversity, very admirable. That a very fond memory and something that I utilize now whenever I'm in bed and can get up and get some stuff done and then go back to sleep later on.
It is so wonderful. There is no shortage of people in this world to inspire us, right? And that's part of what I've wanted to do through my journey. But I think part of leadership is just, you want to help people in your DNA. That's what your grandmother did. That's what your family's done. That's what you want to do. But so I started a new treatment protocol on Monday of chemo and immunotherapy. I went through 5.5 weeks, no side effects the first time around. So they hooked me up to a pump on Monday, which incidentally, I got off this morning, went to the gym, saw my oncologist at the gym. And I'm like, hey man, I'm not trying to overdo it, but I was telling my wife last night, I'm like, somehow my body chemistry, and my physiology is different, so someday I would love for somebody to be able to study, why is my body, my physiology able to handle what is effectively putting poison into your system better than other people. So use me as a guinea pig to figure that out. But overcoming adversity, do you know an artist named Ida Murad?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
I thought she was a guest on my show. I've got to connect the two of you. So
Yeah.
she's an impact artist. I had her on the show right after I got diagnosed, but she is the artist in residence at Georgetown's Cancer Center. So she uses her art, which is impact art, to help heal people. She was partially paralyzed. She grew up in Jordan, lives in LA now, from rheumatoid arthritis for 5 years. She had never been an artist, but she started to paint with her fingers, which is what she still does. And she did like one of the biggest TED Talks in the Middle East, but she's working with a project in the Middle East, a nonprofit. She's a fellow. Name is getting away from me, but to bring young Palestinian and Israeli artists together to do art shows to try to change the narrative in the Middle East. And so I'm like, you guys have a lot in common, but to take her adversity, I was like, 5.5 years is a long time to go through that. But what you did, she was on Kelly Clarkson a month ago. She's just blowing up in the world. But there are so many people like that I'm like, in the mainstream media, we see a lot of the bad. This show is about bringing on people like you and saying, hey, there's more good in the world and more people doing freaking amazing, inspirational stuff like yourself, but maybe they don't get the highlights that they deserve. But man, you inspire the hell out of me, and just our conversation today has.
Yeah, it's the feeling is absolutely mutual. It's to hear some of the things that you've been going through, and we've only known each other for a reasonably short amount of time, and it's very admirable what you're going through. And I will say I wouldn't be at all surprised. Yes, maybe there's some physiological pieces to, if they do end up studying you in some way, shape or form. My belief, and I got this from my great aunt and grandpa who lived to, he was 94. Two of the aunts lived to 96. There was another at 96, one to 100. So I hope I've got those genes, right? Now the genes, I do believe is one thing, but each of them had something that kept their mind, body, and spirit active. My grandpa started woodworking when he was 80. 80. He started, right? Went through until 92 until he couldn't do it anymore. My aunt that I mentioned about, she was, I think I mentioned 94 before. She lived till she was 96. She, it was knitting and as well as the pasties. My other aunt, she made everything in her house, woodworking wise. My uncle, who lived till he was 100, went down to the dancing hall in his Hawaiian shirt he was like the single lad. He went down with his dancing partners, he'd go down and dance the night away. Each of them had something that kept their mind, body, and spirit active. And that, from what I know about you and the conversations that we've had, you have something that keeps that spirit active, a sense of purpose, a sense of drive, a sense of this isn't going to slow me down. I'm going to move through this. And yes, there could be some physiological aspects to it. Absolutely. But I would just almost guarantee, just from the experiences that I've had, seeing that there is, when you have a sense of purpose. And, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl was a great example of this as well in the concentration camps. He said, I had to find beauty in a dirty bowl of water with a fish head floating in an interview once. It's like he had to find purpose. He had to find meaning. He had to find beauty in the moment. He had a sense of purpose as to what he was going to share afterwards. There was a purpose. There was spirit there. And if you don't have that, or if you feel that you need it to go a certain way and then it doesn't go that way, and you've attached to it, the ability to be able to let go, the ability to be able to become non-attached. You become, it's not about losing faith. It's about knowing what you want to experience and trusting that the work you are doing is going to allow you to get to where you want to go. And this is, it just reminded me, there was this song that I wrote in 2020. It was at the start of everything going crazy in the world, and this was in February, and I had just left Australia earlier that month, and I'd just gotten back from Mexico giving a YPO talk at a chapter event there, and moved into a place in Boulder in Colorado. Had a piano put in the living room, and it was a beautiful location, like the view of the mountains. There was deer that would walk past in the backyard. It really felt like when it was snowing on certain days, like someone had just shaken a snow globe, put it down. Yeah. And that's the feeling that I had of like sitting down at the piano and I'm in a snow globe right now. It was so stunningly beautiful. And it was like the most creative period of time of my life from a songwriting standpoint. And one of the songs in particular that I wrote at that time was called Worthwhile. And it's this song that I was reflecting on my nieces and nephews, especially. You know, I just left family and wondering how long is it going to be before I see them again, which ended up being a very long time. Who are they going to become? Are they going to experience a worthwhile life? Like, what problems are they going to come up against? Are they going to overcome those problems, those challenges? And there's definitely me built into the song as well of who am I becoming? And the reason why that song has continued to impact my life over and over and over again, and same with clients that I share it with in talks, is that these 4 questions within the chorus that we can continue to ask ourselves over and over again. And it's, what have I become? Is it all I really love? What am I giving up? And is that worthwhile?
Yeah.
And the reality is that life is a sea of sacrifices. We are giving up things every single day in order to pursue the other things that we're choosing to dedicate time towards. And so if you're not, then you're spreading yourself too thin, and you're not going to be able to go deep enough to get the depth of understanding and create the level of impact you really want. And so being able to answer, especially those final 2 questions, what am I giving up and is that worthwhile? If you can answer enough times, yes, like hand on your heart that what I went through, the things that I had to do to get there, or if you're thinking in a future style piece there of like, who am I going to become and what am I going to have to give up in order to experience that? Is that worthwhile? And if you can answer that yes, that's what can lead to an incredible level of discipline to execute on tasks. When others might see it as obsessive, it's like, no, it's just discipline. I know what I want. I know what I want to experience. I know this is worthwhile. And if you answer enough times no, and I think this only has to be a select number of times. Yeah. If you say no, if it's no, that's where regret can creep in. A lot of people talk about, oh, no regrets. You answer enough times no to that, I don't care what you say about no regrets. You get to your deathbed, there's going to be a moment where you go, if only I'd done this, I should have done that. Yeah, there's going to be those moments. Yeah. And you want to make sure that the decisions that you've made have been worthwhile. And I know that was a massive driver of the decisions that I made. You know, I've been on the piano for 30 years now, but guitar, I only started during the pandemic. It was August 14th, 2021. And I said to my producer, I said, Christo, do you think I should learn guitar, man? He said, yeah, you probably should. I said, all right, I'll get a guitar then. So I'm reluctantly doing it. And then I said, well, if I could just do an hour a day, because the reason for doing it was it was going to add versatility to the talks that I delivered, because, you know, while the grand piano is an epic experience on stage with the keynotes that I deliver, and I love that, not every stage can handle a grand piano. It's maybe not big enough, or they don't have the budget for it, that as well as a speaker fee. Like these pieces, they might not be able to make that happen. And so, well, add versatility to the talks that I deliver by having an acoustic guitar instead. That was the thought process. Okay, if I could just do an hour a day, that would be an outstanding outcome. And the crazy thing happened is once I started on that, once I was able to string enough chords together reasonably fluidly, I wrote a song. It was my first song that I wrote on there. And I sat back afterwards and thought to myself, I wouldn't have written that on the piano. And it was this massive light bulb that went off in my mind. I have access to a whole new realm of creativity that I haven't had access to before. Oh my gosh, creativity is one of my biggest values.
Yeah.
Then a couple months later, I got sick. I went and got tested for COVID. And went to one of those drive-through places that they had testing stations. And I would go in there. There's a bunch of cars there. I'm thinking, man, this is going to take ages for me to get through. And the first car that I drove past, there's this dude just sitting back in the driver's seat on an acoustic guitar. And I just had this light bulb moment. Like, I could have brought mine. I didn't even think about it, Deke, because I've always been tied to a specific geographical location with the piano, or a very long extension cord with the piano, right? And so all of a sudden, there was this newfound freedom that I had to be able to take the thing that I love the most to the places that I love the most. And when I finally was able to go back to Australia, I went down to the beach, one of the beach that we spend a lot of time at as a kid. And back there, you get the entire beach to yourself. It's amazing. Yeah. And it was just me, the beach, the sand, and the guitar. And it was this beautiful, freeing feeling. And so all of a sudden, there was my value of freedom is being met through this. My value of creativity is being met through this. My value of mastery is being met through this. You know, all of these are in my top 6. My value of impact is being met through this, right? Through the versatility of the talks. I'll be able to make a greater impact because I can talk to more people and deliver on more stages. All of a sudden, 4 out of my 6 values are outrightly being lived and breathed through this new action, through this new exercise, through this new instrument that I'm learning. It became the most important skill that I could be learning during that time. And that combined with me asking the question, what am I becoming? Is it all I really love? What am I giving up? And is it worthwhile? Yeah. I was giving up being close to my family because at that time I couldn't get back to Australia. I was also going through my green card process, which meant I wasn't allowed to leave the country. There were so many aspects to it. So while it wasn't an ideal situation, my question to myself is, okay, crappy situation. What am I doing? Who am I becoming that would allow me to say that when I am finally able to go back home, while not ideal, it was absolutely worth the experience that I went through. And so it ended up like 500 days, the first 500 days. Not only was it an hour of piano, hour of vocals, hour of storytelling every day that I built on top of the coaching and speaking, it was 4 hours a day. So it was 2,000 hours over the course of 500 days, an average of 4 hours a day, every day for 500 days. And it's at a level of discipline. I've always feel like I've been a disciplined person. That was at a whole nother level than I've ever experienced before. And it was a relentless pursuit of who I'm becoming and knowing that is worthwhile, and knowing that if I allow anything to get in the way of that, that is going to reduce the amount of it being worthwhile and the time that I'm having away from my family, right? Yeah. And so it allowed me to be very, very, very intentional. And, you know, I'm a single guy. I went without dating that entire period. I did not date.
Damn.
I barely socialized because it was 12 to 16 hour days by the time you have all the training and all the coaching and speaking on top of that. It's not necessarily that I recommend that you go that full on because there was definitely experience, like I think it was day 470 or something like that. Crazy experience of feeling starved of physical touch, and not in a sexual way or anything like that, in a purely a platonic way. And it was the realization that I have that built into our systems is the need for connection, in person, physical touch. It's what allowed us to survive for so many thousands of years. It's built into our DNA. And I felt like my skin was almost like crawling, that feeling of I need that. And so, I don't know how much, if I could go on much longer of the, that many hours, because I'm back, doing an hour a day and hour of vocals, hour of guitar, hour of piano. And it's a nice, decent amount where it's still disciplined, but not like as insane as what it was. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I knew what I wanted. I knew and was very intentional about it. And I continued to ask myself, okay, what other skill sets do I need to be learning to be aligned to the future version of myself, so that I'm ready to execute and I'm ready to capitalize on the opportunities that are there. Capitalize on the opportunities now, but capitalize on the opportunities that are 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. I think is incredibly important to do, because it allows us to be very, very intentional about how we're going about living our lives, building our relationships, and letting go of the things that are no longer a fit.
Yep. Well, we could talk for hours, and we will, because this won't be your only time on here, but I wanted to share a music memory with you, and then potentially if we could hear a song to sort of close it out, I'd love to do that. But so a number of years ago, I did a TEDx talk. So I didn't know, I didn't prepare anything, because I do everything extemporaneously, but I didn't know the lineup. So there's a guy here in Augusta who is a brain surgeon. His name is Jack Rigg. He used to be the lead guitarist for Blue Oyster Cult. So he does this whole talk on brain chemistry. Dude is brilliant. Then breaks out Les Paul Sunburst and just does this freaking solo. And I got up and I'm like, why did nobody tell me? And I just want to say, Jack, thank you for at least not playing Don't Fear the Reaper, because I wouldn't have been able to go on after that. But so, I'm not a musician. I hope I made up for it. But would you play us a song as we start to get towards the end?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe I'll do that song Worthwhile, which was the one that I mentioned with the 4 questions, and I'll jump over to the piano. And a little caveat: I mentioned this about this before we started recording. That there's a couple of camera angles here that I'll jump onto. And one of these, the camera angle is pretty good, the quality is decent, but it's not my best camera angle. Camera lens. That lens has only just been repaired after being damaged in the Colombian rainforest. There's a whole story around that maybe we'll save for another time. But yes, it was damaged in action when I was there filming with as a National Geographic explorer, and yes, it didn't fare well in that experience. So it's been getting repaired. But
before we get that, real quick, where can people find you?
Yeah, CameronAtlas.com is the website. And then, LinkedIn is a great place to connect, as well as the other social platforms, Cameron Atlas as well. So at Cameron Atlas is across each of the platforms. So would love to connect with each of you.
All right, man. Well, let's hear some good music.
Let's do it.
Young boy, dreaming of a time when he could fly. A little girl, making sure that teddy bear is a wonderful life. What will I become? Will it be all I really love? And what will I be giving up? Is that worthwhile? Is that worthwhile? A young man trying to find his place in a foreign land. His hometown didn't ever quite understand. What have I become? And is it all I really love? What have I given up? And is that worthwhile? Is that worthwhile? Young girl, dreaming of a better world. She broke down, witness to all this pain and suffering. What have I become? And was it all what have I given up? And is that worthwhile? Is that worthwhile?
Man, what an amazing way to close us out. And Cameron, you and I have always talked about just music is a great uniter. Thank you for doing that for our audience. Thank you for being an amazing guest. We'll have to talk about it next time, but I do want to talk a little bit more about music. One of my favorite bands just released a new album, The Hives. I want to get your take on that. But
I'm gonna go check it out.
Being an amazing guest. But that's all the time we got, man.
Deke, absolute pleasure coming on. I really appreciate it.
Look forward to having you back. Dropping the mic and we're out.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.